I decided I'm going to go ahead and fit my later version steering wheel, even without having it recovered, simply because even in its current condition, it's 1,000 times better than what's in here. And while that's out, I'm going to go ahead and change this horrible cluster over. And since we have the luxury of time and space at the moment, I think I'm even going to remove cruise control stalk just to make removal of that cluster ever so slightly more luxurious. And once again, removing the steering wheel, as per my last video, it's exactly the same procedure with this older version with a rectangular horn pad. You pry out the star before pulling the pad off. And yeah, the impact gun just spins out that bolt with no effort at all. Much better than doing it by hand. So I'll go ahead and get this stalk out now, and we'll have a look at the cluster removal. On hindsight, that was a lot more effort than I realized. It's not just a case of undoing that Phillips screw. It actually slots in with this T-shaped piece into the actual indicator assembly. So it's not an easy thing to remove, unless you do all three screws, maneuver this out a bit, and then you can actually slide it off, just for the purposes of getting the cluster out a bit easier. That should make life easier, so we'll see how that goes now. So when I pulled that cluster out, this piece of rubber just fell off the underside. It's what's used for holding this thing in nice and tight, among other things. Yeah, I've never had a problem getting these things out by hand. I've never needed to use a special tool, but I do have freakishly strong hands, so this method might not work for everybody. When it's on this angle, I then just reach in behind and unplug everything, including unscrewing the speedo cable on this mechanical speedo version car. V8s are electronic, so it's a lot easier. It may not come out this far the first time it's removed, because the speedo cable is quite tightly adjusted from the factory and screwed into its saddles. You might need to loosen those up, but once it's in this position, or it's been removed before, it's pretty damn easy to remove the cluster. So I'm going to go ahead and unplug everything and remove it now. And the cluster is now removed. Just as I suspected, this speedometer has been calibrated at some stage. This company in Perth seems to do instrumentation for everything, because I've seen this sticker many times before. And the fact that it has a 8-digit landline telephone number tells me that it was not that long ago, because Australia used to have 7-digit phone numbers in the early 90s. So, yeah, I can't exactly pinpoint the date, unless there's a date on the sticker, which they have not done. Well, there you go. The sticker has 200, so it means it's any period beyond year 2000 up to 2009 that this sticker was used. So that's pretty recent for a 124 anyway. And that's a rat's nest of cables that I have to plug back in once I've got this other cluster ready. And because the replacement does not have the economy gauge, I'm going to have to block off this vacuum line, or remove it, because it has nothing to connect to anymore. The other thing I'm going to do, I'm not going to bother fitting this to my replacement cluster. This is the flashy LED for the old immobilizer that's in here. I'm going to go ahead and connect this up to the factory type security insert with the red LED in the middle. I'll just cut this off and connect it up to that. I will save this, because I think this is fantastic what I've made here, so I can use this for something else at some stage. Just an interesting fact, which I'm sure many people already know: when you're changing clusters, not all speedos are the same. You've got variations with differential ratios and gearbox selections and whatnot, and the faces on the speedos. what you want to make sure of if you want an accurate speedo when you've done the change is you want to make sure the K rating is the same, and you'll find that sticker on the actual either the speedo itself or it'll be somewhere on the cluster. And these are both K780, so I'm good to go. I knew that was the case anyway because the donor cluster came from exactly the same model car with exact same configuration. So yeah, there was no real risk of getting the wrong version. The only difference is, as already mentioned, it does not have the economy gauge because that was deleted sometime shortly after the production of my two cars. So I found an appropriate piece of plastic to jam in there tightly to block off that vacuum line, and the perfect hiding space for that is just in here where it slots in nicely and it's not going to get in the way. And it's always there if I ever want to convert to an economy gauge version instrument cluster again. You never know what might come up in the future. So I'm just going to go ahead and test this out and make sure this cluster works okay. Before doing that, I am going to remove this panel just to feed the immobilizer LED wire down there, just because that's going to be pretty difficult to access once the cluster is back in. And I'm going to come back and test the cluster after that, just the illumination and whatnot, to make sure it's okay. And that's it. Moment of truth, does this cluster work? Or does this car catch on fire as soon as I put it in key position 2? All good. And does it illuminate? Well, it's hard to see during the day, but outside temperature does. I don't know how I'm going to be able to see that until night time. That's a problem. I'll just have to come and test that out at night. So it is actually possible to see the illumination of that cluster during the daytime. If you look up from down here, you can actually see the light spewing out from the LEDs that I've put in there. So that should look pretty good at the night time. Now I'm going to move my attention to this and put the factory kind of security insert there. And I'm going to change out this faded hazard switch as well. While that wheel is not perfect, it is so much better than what was in there. So the only thing to do now is to go for a test drive and make sure that speedometer works. One thing I haven't ever actually tested.